got a bunch of people already joining us right now. It's currently 1:30. Hopefully you all had a great lunch. So I'm super excited to be co-hosting this panel with you guys this afternoon on coping with COVID cabin fever. As many of you can all appreciate, you know, the last week or so has been pretty tough working from home, having our kids with us as well. I currently have my almost 6-year-old sitting here with me as well. She also has some cabin fever, and you know, I just thought, you know, it's definitely relevant for all of us to be here to learn about this important topic, and figure out some coping tools and some strategies that we can all take away to hopefully alleviate some of the stress that this self-isolation, social distancing has created for us. So I do have a great lineup of speakers today. So our lead speaker, Nalwanga Musisi, is a registered psychotherapist qualifying. Nalwanga, are you here? Want to turn your video on and say hi to everyone?
Hi, everybody.
How are you, Nalwanga?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. We also are super grateful and fortunate to have two of our family doctors with us as well. We have Dr. Sarah Cook, as well as Dr. Saheb Masoor. Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Dr. Saheb, hey, how are you? So, COVID cabin fever. It's extremely pressing. It's a very current, relevant topic. We're super excited to have you guys chat about it today, and I know all of you guys have some great tips, tricks, tools, strategies for us to take home. So I'm gonna let you get started. Nalwanga, take it away.
All right. Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Nalwanga, and it's great to see the group that we have today at 1:30. Thanks to everybody for coming out. So on today's agenda, we're going to focus on 3 major areas. So what is cabin fever, and how it relates to COVID-19 and anxiety, as well as some strategies for self-regulation that we can actually start implementing in our lives today.
Now, while Nalwanga is going to the next slide, Dr. Cook, Dr. Masoor, is this something that you guys are getting a lot of questions about right now in your practice? Is there a lot of like fear around COVID-19, or are people really kind of feeling, you know, lost in terms of how to navigate this new normal?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm getting a lot of calls of people that are just anxious about what they should look for, you know, around how they would feel if they got this, and then just some people that are just home and they're bored and going crazy with their kids and what to do. And so I think, you know, we have to be available to talk about this, but I think that this is going to be a really great talk. So thanks for doing this, Nalwanga.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I agree. Ditto. Exactly what Dr. Cook said, 100%.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us, Nalwanga, what is cabin fever?
Okay, so here we go. Like before we get started, I just want to let everybody know, feel free to jot down any questions that you have in the chat. We'll be looking at the chat and engaging with you guys that way. So feel free to make absolute use of it as we go on. Okay, so we're going to get started. And before we get started, I want all of us to quickly scan this list and really ask ourselves, over the past week or so, have I seen myself anywhere on this list? So I guess we can do this through chat. Type 10 if, for example, you've been experiencing decreased motivation. And what about food cravings? Or trouble concentrating? Difficulty waking? We're kind of hearing that one a lot as well. Oh, there goes the chat. It's on fire. I love it.
A little while to find it.
Frequent napping. That's also one that's kind of popping up a lot. Okay. Great. Oh, are we able to go into the next slide?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, so what is cabin fever? By the looks of it, it kind of sounds like a lot of us have started experiencing some form of cabin fever. So I went looking for an official definition, and the best one that I got was from the actual dictionary. And so Merriam-Webster describes it as a distressing claustrophobic irritability or restlessness that's experienced by either a person or a group, so it could be like a family, who is stuck in isolation or confined to quarters for an extended period of time. So essentially what we're going through right now. The reality is that for many of us, either working from home or temporarily off or from school or work until it's safe, obviously, to resume regular social activities, the likelihood of experiencing some level of irritability or restlessness is relatively high at this time.
Are we okay on the slides there, guys?
Let's see. Oh, there we go. Okay. So in my line of work, and I'm sure the doctors can speak to this as well, I've definitely noticed that there's an uptick in folks feeling or reporting feelings of anxiety, be it temporary or situational or more chronic in nature. There are two major themes that I'm really hearing in the room more recently. One is a fear of getting sick or making someone else who is vulnerable, be it a loved one or somebody else that you might, let's say, meet in the grocery store, sick, or two, the fear of the financial impact that having to quarantine ourselves or socially distance ourselves will have on our bottom line. So far, I've been hearing a lot of folks also describing feelings of loneliness, boredom, as Dr. Cook mentioned, isolation, etc. These are things that can also play a role in triggering higher than usual amounts of anxiety. Um, maybe there's like another thing that we're hearing that the doctors could speak to.
Yeah, Dr. Mastor, like what else are you seeing right now in terms of, those are all valid things. Like I think we're all kind of experiencing these stresses around like finances, around being stuck at home with kids and the uncertainty overall. How would you sort of navigate your patients at this time with these concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all very legitimate concerns, and certainly seeing a lot more of that in clinic. I mean, apart from like we mentioned, financial concerns and that sort of thing, just being stuck in the same four walls or the same home, people tend to, again, get exactly what we're talking about is cabin fever. And sometimes they just need a little bit of guidance on how to manage that in a healthy, balanced way. And I think, we are going to get to that during the course of the talk. But definitely, and so I'm seeing a little bit of talk there in the chat saying, we're talking about partners, families. Can we also acknowledge people who are home alone? I think that's a great point. Again, it's obviously potentially even more difficult for people who are in fact home alone, because then they don't have people to interact with, to talk to talk about the difficulties and some of the anxieties they're facing during this period of uncertainty. And so one of the things that I really, really recommend is structure. Obviously we go to school, we go to work, and the structure is in place for us. And it becomes tricky when we're on our own, as I'm sure anyone who's had a long weekend or a few days off from work, as I'm sure we all have now, to initiate that structure yourself. But certainly that'll be something we do talk about in a bit more detail. But that's usually one of the first things I talk about, implement a time for work, a time for you to have some downtime, not that you go on Netflix and 7 hours later you go, what year is it? Right? It's good to have those things in place, a time for play, a time for work, a time for this, a time for that. And certainly for people that are home alone, we're social creatures. We crave that interaction, right? And again, I know this will be mentioned, but again, making time to reach out to people that you maybe haven't talked to in a while. And thankfully, we live in an age where that's so easy at the push of a button, through the telephone, through FaceTime, through any sorts of means.
Yeah, that's great. The good news is, if we could call it good news, just being optimistic here, is that this is totally normal and it should be expected given the current situation going on. Anxiety really is just one of those many emotions that we as human beings experience based on certain events or situations. It really starts to become more of a problem, however, when it begins to morph into more chronic and irrational patterns that begin to interfere with our day-to-day functions. So if we're beginning to display markers for avoidance behavior, maybe some incessant worry, or having issues with our concentration and memory, remember that was on our list, we may want to explore additional ways in which we can kind of access supportive measures to help manage some of these anxieties that we're having. The trickiest part of living through this time right now is really grounding ourselves and getting very creative in the way that we address our idle minds during this time of social distancing. Okay, so because feelings of anxiety, fear, sadness, and feeling uncertain are normal during a pandemic, being proactive about our mental health can really help keep our mind and body stronger. Even for the relatively self-aware and emotionally adept folks, enduring challenging times like this might take some of us actually by surprise. By learning healthy ways, for example, to move through adversity, kind of what Dr. Masura was kind of mentioning earlier, we're better able to cope and recover more quickly, at the very least, start heading in that direction. So how do we get that done? Well, first things first is we need to reestablish control. So the early stages of a pandemic can be very anxiety provoking, because during this time, you don't really know how widespread or deadly the illness is going to end up being. So our minds can easily wander off into darker spaces that may be actually hard to get out of by the time that we actually realize that we're there. Things that we can actually control include things like our bedtime and our wake-up routines. We can control what our day will look like, even our week. We can find personal projects around the house to busy ourselves with, perhaps revisit resolutions and remind ourselves of things like, the goals that we had for 2020, hashtag 2020, this is the year. Maybe spring cleaning was on your list. And
we're wondering if 2020 is over yet.
Right. 2020 came and we're like, okay. So maybe it's a spring cleaning project. Maybe you never had time to go through and clean out your storage unit. But we might be wanting to look to these projects, especially if we're finding that our days are left empty and bare with not much else to do.
And would any of you chime in too, just even about with the parents that have kids at home right now too? Maybe this is for one of the docs, maybe Dr. Cook, like what would you say for, even just the parents right now? There's so many parents with like their kids, just running rampant at home right now, not a whole lot of curriculum going on. Like, do you think the structure is just as important for them as well? And is that something that parents should be also trying to implement with their children?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually even almost more important for the kids to have a routine and to stick to it. Really try and stick to bedtimes and meal times. Go for walks. If you're self-isolating but not quarantined, you can still go for walks. Just stay away from people. Let them run around in the backyard. Create some projects that you can do. I know one of my patients was telling me about Pinterest has a lot of really neat ideas for kids to keep them busy and away from too much screen time, because that's one of the things we really want to avoid right now is overusing screens to just, okay, stop being annoying, watch this TV show for the next 6 hours. And I get it. That's, easier and the kids are happier, but I think we still need to put in some educational time, some play time, of course. But I think keeping a routine and bedtimes and all that stuff is very important for kids.
Mm-hmm. That's
Awesome.
great. So it actually feeds right into the second thing that we can actually do, which is like setting a routine. So if you're one of those people that has had to introduce a work from home or online school type of arrangement, this strategy is especially, important. setting a temporarily permanent routine actually comes hand in hand with the acceptance process. So we're in this and we're not, fighting or resisting it. This is our new norm for the next little bit. There's really no telling how long we're going to be having to socially distance from one another. So being sure that, we are prepared to kind of be prepared to stick this out for the next little bit is equally important. If you're currently on a treatment plan, see if your practitioner is employing new innovative ways to kind of make sure that you're still meeting your treatment goals. I know that Sapna can definitely speak more to this at the end of the webinar, but many of our services have gone virtual. So your routine doesn't have to just stop just because of COVID-19. So you might want to start figuring out what your break system will look like. How are you going to socialize with others, coworkers, classmates, what your workspace is going to look like. It's really important to ensure that we create separation between where we work and actually where we spend our downtime to help kind of create that sense of relaxation when we're actually not engaged with work. So less temporary, setups and more, temporarily permanent setups for the next little bit. Okay, so refocusing. This one is all about focusing on the things that we actually can control, like washing our hands and not touching our face. I know I struggle with not touching my face. I didn't realize that until COVID, so there we go. But we can actually make a conscious choice to stay forward-looking during this time. Now more than ever, we should actually be prioritizing happiness, tapping into positive movements, doing what we can to stay connected with others. There are some great movements happening on platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. I know I saw there was a push-up movement that's going around, a drinking water movement that's going around. I saw Sapna doing that one. That was great. Really tapping into those and harnessing some of the positivity that we can actually get from these movements will be very important for us during this time. So being mindful, this is one that we, at least as a therapist, I see a lot, how can we be more mindful? Are there ways that you can be more mindful in your day-to-day life? So often a quick fix for this, as we are kind of talking about TV, Netflix, things that we can actually do to kind of distract us through the long days. So a quick fix for an easy distraction is the television or our iPhones, our Androids, tablets. But we need to be mindful of what type of information we're actually feeding our minds. So while it is actually very easy to rationalize that we need to know, for example, the latest updates going on about COVID-19, the 24 hours news cycle can actually be very overwhelming to the system. If you are a person who likes to, in your downtime, let's say without COVID going on, enjoy shows like Containment, Outbreak, TV shows that might hit a little too close to home right now and are based on storylines that might be easier to believe in this climate, you might want to be more mindful about those types of shows. So maybe opting for things like comedies, more maybe different topics. Instead of seeing disasters and all that, we might go into mysteries. If you are living alone, that was also kind of brought up. And you really like to, watch a lot of serial killer shows, maybe we don't want to watch too many of those types of shows. Just to be mindful of the type of information that we're consuming, as it does tend to come back up in things like dreams or our wandering thoughts and things like that. Okay, so finally, reconnecting with nature. There's actually a ton of research that's being done or that has been done, and it's suddenly making a comeback with regards to the impact that nature has on our moods and our overall experience of life. Be it a park, a trail, your balcony, your deck, making some time to get outside might actually be a good thing, safely, of course. So this is actually a picture of the trail in High Park. They have a great water body. I know I'm hearing a lot of folks getting back out there, running again, maybe, walking their dogs more regularly, walking their cats. But this might be something that we might look into more now than ever.
Docs, maybe you guys can also chime in. This is a question that came up in yesterday's webinar, and it comes up quite a bit right now. What are acceptable outdoor activities? Because we obviously want to promote exercise. This is so vital for our mood, our physical bodies. We need the movement right now more than ever. Being so sedentary and being, cooped up in our homes. What is an acceptable type of outdoor activity for someone who is in quarantine, someone who is self-isolating versus someone who's social distancing? Is there a way that you can define those categories for us and what would be allowable in each one?
Sure, I can do that. So social distancing is deliberately increasing the physical space between people to avoid spreading illness, which involves staying, at least 6 feet away from other people in order to lessen your chances of catching any sort of infectious disease, right? It basically involves avoiding larger crowds or crowded areas. And so, we're talking about going outside, reconnecting, so important. And it's actually helpful in 2 ways. One is that, you reconnect with nature, helps you feel better, like Nalwanga said. Lots of good evidence say that, we really benefit from that from a mood and mental health point of view. And number 2, it's actually counts as exercise or physical activity when you do get out there. Even if it's as simple as walking, it all counts. And so it's so important. Again, you fit that into your schedule, go for a walk, go for a run, all these sorts of things. For people that, and so going outside, taking part in these activities, completely fine for people who are social distancing. Again, the most important thing is you're keeping that distance, approximately 6 feet. And you want to try not to engage in anything that involves groups, so you want to avoid group sports. You want to avoid using things that involve equipment. So things like ultimate frisbee or basketball, that sort of thing, because then you're all touching the same thing, right? And so really involves, one of the best things could be walking, cycling, running, all those sorts of things. There's some really great apps for people who want to get into walking or running or going slightly longer distances. Things like Couch to 5K, some really great apps that can help motivate you and keep track of your progress that way. On the other hand, people who are in quarantine are the people who, generally speaking, you fall into that category if you may have been exposed to COVID-19 or if you're at risk for coming down with it, right? So people who either may have come into contact with someone who is a confirmed or presumed case, or somebody who just traveled in order to give them that 14-day time frame to see, do they develop any symptoms? Now, obviously, self-quarantine involves staying at home, right? Not having visitors, using standard hygiene, washing your hands, not sharing things like towels and utensils around the home. But just because you're at home, again, there's no reason why you can't stay physically active and reconnect. Ideally, even things as simple as going out into your balcony, taking time to appreciate the view around you, a little bit of greenery that might be present depending on where you are, the changing of the season, all these sorts of things can be very, very helpful. And certainly from the exercise point of view, lots of really fantastic resources online, especially YouTube. And we can certainly get into specifics later on that can, provide you with an at-home workout routine, not requiring any extra equipment that you can do, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. So some really great resources out there that we can talk about. And last but not least, isolation. So isolation is reserved for people who are confirmed to have COVID-19. Right? That means keeping people away, it means keeping this contagious illness away from people who are infected, meaning the person who is in isolation is by themselves at home, not interacting with anybody ideally. Again, if there are other people in the household, again, making sure that not sharing things like towels, utensils, not having visitors, and again, keeping a healthy distance, bare minimum 6 feet, ideally being the only person in the room at a time if isolation is what is happening.
Awesome. And I think that's really important. And another question that came up, I'll let you, Dr. Cook, ask this because this kind of falls into the reconnecting. If you live in a condo and you want to go out for a walk to get a coffee or to connect with a few other people in your condo building, different units within the condo building, to perhaps go to the common space of your condo, like the balcony of your condo. Is that something that you would recommend, or is that also considered breaking social distancing and social isolation rules?
Well, if you're quarantined, no, you can't do that, but you could do it via a Zoom meeting. So for example, my condo board, we always do socials once a month. And so we just decided to do our social will be over Zoom, and we're just all going to get a chance to chat. We'll see each other, smile and laugh. And I think that's what's going to happen for the next little while. If you're just self-isolating and you're at home, then you can get together with, one or two other people, but you do have to maintain that distance, just like Dr. Messer was saying. You do have to maintain that 6 feet distance between people. But again, if you're going to go for a walk, sure, I've seen people walking and they are maintaining the distance, and I think that's great. You can still see people that way and get some fresh air. So I think that's a great idea.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay, so if only you remember one thing from today's webinar, I really hope that it is this: you are not alone. Know that as human beings, we are social and we need one another. So regardless of whether you're currently living at home by yourself or with family, you're not alone in this experience. Realizing really that COVID affects us all and that none of us are actually immune from these fears is incredibly humbling. And I'm beginning to hear oddly comforting in a way. If you are looking to speak to a professional about your specific concerns, I'm just one of 7 psychotherapy practitioners on staff. We're actually quite a big team. We have 4 registered social workers, 2 psychotherapy interns, and me. And we're all here ready to work hand in hand with the doctors to kind of support the Integra community at large. So if you need to, feel free to drop an email, say hi. You can schedule a free complimentary consultation and see if that's something that you kind of want to explore.
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway is, we are a community. I mean, we worked literally around the clock last week to put together our virtual services. Whether it's telemedicine or telewellness, we just want to make sure that you guys know we're here. And even if it just means you attend our webinars and just feel a sense of community that way until we are back operating in live, whatever it is, we're here to support you. We just want to make sure that you guys are getting, the education and the information that you want and you need. I know a lot of you have been asking a lot of different types of questions, and we kind of base our webinars based on the type of feedback we get from you guys. So, if there's any sort of other topics that you want us to take on, let us know. We're trying to host 1 to 2 webinars every single day. We're so fortunate that, our doctors, our practitioners, everyone's joining together in this community to really reach out right now in the best way we can. And of course, like we said, we have the virtual services available to you. And I think, in terms of, I think there's a slide that kind of mentions what some of our upcoming, so we have some fun ones that are coming up too. We wanted to keep it a little, optimistic about the summer. So we do have a foot care webinar tomorrow. So, I don't know about some of you guys, but I have not been able to go to my eyebrow lady or my pedicure lady. So, this might be a good webinar for those of you who are missing out on your self-care. So there will be a great webinar led by our chiropodist and also one of our doctors who are going to just talk about, foot care and things like that, because again, it's really hard right now to get that contact time with a doctor or with, a practitioner to really help you through some issues. And if you are running outside again right now, things like ingrown toenails, those are all actual valid issues right now that need to be addressed. A lot of people actually were really blown away by by the COVID panel that we did last week. And so most of the questions from there were about people's children. So we decided to do a very specific COVID and kids panel, which is also tomorrow. So please join in for that. If you have any questions about your babies, your infants, your toddlers, schooling, fitness, education, activities, whatever it is, they're kind of stemming on all of that for you tomorrow. I guess I'll just leave it with you guys. Do you have anything else you want to add right now? Docs or Nalwanga, you did an amazing job. I think, we touched on all the great things that we all need to be focused on. Dr. Cook, Dr. Masroor, do you guys have anything else you want to add?
The only other thing I would add was just, I know with Easter, Passover, other sort of religious times are coming up. My family's doing a Zoom Easter dinner, and I think that we should all kind of try and adopt this new reality for us right now. And I think we can still have fun and connect. And so I really encourage you to reach out to your friends, your family, anybody elderly in the community, anyone that you know is alone or struggling. It's a good time to get out of ourselves as well, and to really try and support our friends, our family, and our community right now. And I think it's a great opportunity to do so, especially if you're home and you're bored.
Absolutely. Oh, and also we did host this webinar this morning, and there was a resource document that was out and circulating. Nalwanga, I believe we're sharing that for this morning's panel. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming I'll get some tens in the webinar chat if you guys also want this support document as well on resources during this time. Awesome. Yeah, so we'll also include it on today's webinar recording as well. And someone asked about tomorrow, kids and COVID around pregnancy. Of course, it's everything, prenatal, postnatal, like any questions that you have around just in general, like the topics around kids, whether you're expecting or whether you have a newborn or you have a teenager, join in tomorrow. It's going to be super useful. And as always, we're here. So call us during our regular business hours, email us, message us, shoot out to us on Instagram if you have any feedback. If you have any feedback just about our webinars in general, we don't take anything offensively. We love to know. We want to know. And thank you again for joining. And thank you, everyone. Docs, Nalwanga, thank you so much for giving up your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay,
happy social distancing.
Yes. Take care, guys.